Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Kayla and this is Kayla and the Cards. If you're new here, Kayla and the Cards is a channel all about tarot. Typically I do videos that are instructional on how to read tarot cards, but today I'm going to be doing something a little different, a little more relaxed and fun, and I'm going to be doing a tour of my tarot and oracle deck collection. So I have about 15 decks in total between tarot and oracle, definitely more tarot, but it's quite the range of some indie decks, some mass market decks, and all different kinds of art styles and things. So that's what we're going to be going through today. I'll just show you each deck, a few of my favorite cards from it, and just talk about my relationship with the deck, what I like to use it for, and things like that. Let me know down below if you have any of these decks and how you feel about them, or maybe what your favorites are, or some that are on your wish list. I'd love to hear about it. But yeah, let's just jump right into it. I'm going to be starting off with some more traditional or mass market decks. I figure that those are the ones that people are probably more familiar with, or you may have seen more often than not. So the first deck I want to start with is actually the first tarot deck I ever purchased, and that was the Morgan Greer Tarot. These are what the card backs look like. Just a simple like US Games style deck, pretty easy to find. So I keep mine actually in this kind of bag because, as you all know, if you have a deck for a while, the box tends to get really bashed up. So I just like to keep it in this bag, and it's just the deck that's most special to me because it's the first one that I got. I have a really deep connection with it. If I had to get rid of all of my other decks, I'd of course be sad, but if I got to keep this one, that's really what's most important to me. I love the art style, very 1970s, it's very bright colors. So this is my absolute favorite card in the world, which is the World card, and specifically this version of it from the Morgan Greer I just love. Here's the Ace of Cups. So you can see it's just super bold, super bright. There's just something about it that feels super, I don't know, familiar to me in a weird way. There's something about the colors that I love in a reading that they just really jump out at you. They give you a very emotive response, at least for me. For the most part, the deck is very Rider-Waite-Smith based, but there are a few variations. So like the Sun card is a little more Marseille style, but overall very easy deck to translate from the RWS system. Here's another example. So yeah, absolutely love this deck. Since this deck is my favorite, I obviously use it quite a bit and have over the past few years. So you can see it's like a little bashed up, like rubbing off on the sides and things. So I didn't want to carry it around all the time anymore. I was just worried about it getting too damaged. So I actually purchased the tin version of it, which comes in this little tin. And this is what the box also looks like for the normal Morgan Greer in the tuck box. So I bought the tin because then I can just keep it in my purse and bring it around everywhere and just have like my favorite deck with me without actually having that specific deck. So that's been great. I will say the connection is a little bit different because obviously it's not exactly the same, but I love having that art around. I love just being able to use the deck for multiple people and not worrying about it getting damaged. So just for a comparison, so yeah, coloring is pretty close. I should probably stop covering my face. But yeah, that's what that looks like. So I also edged this deck in blue. So the sides of it are blue, which I love. And if that's something you're interested in learning how to do, it's super easy. I can make a quick video on it. Just let me know down below. I have a few decks that I've done this to, so you'll see that throughout this video. But this was the first one that I did. Overall, Morgan Greer is #1 for me, so it's a good place to start things off, but I love all my other decks too, so let's jump into those as well. So I'm not going to be ordering these in order of purchase, but these just kind of so happen to go together. So the next deck I bought was a version of the Rider-Waite-Smith because I was getting more serious about tarot, and I knew that I had to really have that if I want to learn seriously because so much is based off of the Rider-Waite-Smith. But I was not really a fan of the typical Rider tarot pack. Comes in the yellow box. I did not love the coloring. I know a lot of people kind of feel the same way. It's just, I don't know, really harshly printed and bright in a weird way that I don't like. You would think I would like bright because of the Morgan Greer, but it's just different, trust me. So I went with the Smith-Waite Centennial Edition. which looks like this. As you can see, the box is very damaged, as I mentioned before, so this one might have to go in a pouch or something here soon too. But I love this deck. Coloration is awesome. It's a lot more muted than the traditional Rider pack. It's supposedly a bit more true to the original artwork by Pamela Coleman Smith, which is great. So some examples of this, which if you've seen any of my Tarot 101 videos, this is the deck that I use for that. But, I mean, you know, your typical Rider-Waite-Smith imagery, but just a little more muted. The white borders also aren't as stark, which I like. So yeah, this was a very foundational deck for me in terms of learning the tarot, getting serious about my study with it, and just taking all those meanings further. And what I do like is that it's interesting between the Rider-Waite-Smith and the Morgan Greer to kind of compare those interpretations and get a deeper sense of the card meaning. And that's something that I love about collecting decks overall, is that you just always get fresh interpretations and ideas about what these card meanings are. It's just great to always learn something new and see a different interpretation or artistic expression of these archetypes. So the last deck I have that's a little bit more traditional is the Aquarian Tarot. So I actually purchased this fairly recently. It was on my wish list for a while. It also came out in the 70s like the Morgan Greer, but it's very Art Deco style, pretty interesting. So this one, this is the Lover's card. What's pretty cool is on all the majors, the font is different and very stylized, which I like. It's an example of Three of Cups. So a very consistent color scheme throughout. And the star, it's one of my favorites. Yeah, so I haven't worked with this deck a whole lot yet. The backs as well. I think that what I've noticed is I have a little bit of issue with white borders. I find them pretty intrusive, and I think that that's why I like the Morgan Greer so much, is because it is borderless. So that's something I'm struggling a little with the Aquarian Tarot. I kind of want to trim it, but I haven't ever done that before, so we'll see if I ever get around to it. But overall, I do like the art style. I think it's super interesting, very different. So I've actually seen in a lot of esoteric shops and places like that, they actually group the Rider-Waite, the Morgan Greer, and the Aquarian Tarot together as sort of like, you know, the OGs of tarot. So they were important to have in my collection personally, especially Morgan Greer and Aquarian for that 70s art style that I really enjoy. You'll see that come up again later. And of course, the Rider-Waite-Smith as a foundational deck. So I have one more mass market deck to show you before we move on to the indie ones. So this one is called the Everyday Witch Tarot, and this comes in this huge box. So this is made by Llewellyn, the publishing company, so pretty much all of their new decks come in these giant boxes, which are actually great because, so they have like this magnetic enclosure, and you get this entire guidebook with the deck, which is pretty great. Full color images, it's awesome. And then you have the cards in here. So it's really nice to have on a shelf. It just looks like another book pretty much, which is cool. You don't have to worry about the box getting damaged. Obviously it's not super transportable, but if you want to just slip your cards in a bag or something, you can do that. So these are the backs. I think they're super cute, very witchy. And this deck is pretty modern, but it's also like got that retro feel. It's these witches that are very typical witches of having the striped stockings and the pointy hats and that sort of thing, which some people don't like. I think it's pretty cute. It's very like Halloween-y and just an aesthetic that I appreciate. But there's also some variation too. They're not all super witchy like that. I love this card for some reason, like the chocolate cake and the wine just looks like a really great idea. The star. So you can see there's variation. It's not all pointy hats and stuff. And then there's the High Priestess, which I love. She's got her rune stones and her tarot cards. Pretty sweet. So I got this deck last year. It was a gift. I've really enjoyed working with it. It actually calls me out, to be honest. Like, it's a little harsher than you would think for being so cutesy. But yeah, I really enjoy this. I also have the accompanying Oracle deck, the Everyday Witch Oracle, which we'll get to in the Oracle deck section. But yeah, that wraps things up for the mass market decks. I actually have one more, but I don't have it here with me. I also have the Light Seers Tarot, which I'll link down below. A list of all the decks that I've shown here if you're interested. But that one is absolutely gorgeous. It's by Chris Ann. Really modern. I actually think of it sort of like a modern Morgan Greer because the colors are so bright and lovely and it's borderless, and I really like it. But I forgot it at my mom's house and she's probably using it, honestly. But yeah, so that one's not included, so I have 14 decks to show you today. But just know that that one is also part of my collection. And I bought that a few months ago. During quarantine, I spent quite a bit on decks, I'll be honest. That one is really great. I love reading for other people with it. The fact that it's so non-traditional in a lot of ways, I think it's great for people who maybe are new to tarot or a little skeptical or things like that. But it's also really rich with symbolism, so great deck overall. Highly recommend that one. So that about wraps up my mass market decks and some of the more traditional stuff, but now we'll be moving on to the indie decks. So the first indie deck I have is the Prisma Visions Tarot by James R. Eads. His artwork is awesome. He just came out with a new Oracle deck that actually matches this tarot deck called the Cosma Visions. And then there's actually a monochrome version of this called the Light Visions Tarot. So this has a really nice box. Just the snap enclosure. You get this guidebook. So really lovely. So the deck looks like this. You have these backs. They're very shiny, which I'll be honest, I don't love. I'm more of a matte fan. These tend to stick together when you're shuffling, but of all things, like, it's absolutely gorgeous otherwise. You have this really pretty silver gilding. And then some of my favorite cards. So I love this Two of Cups. Super cute. Chariot. So this is quite non-traditional. It follows the Rider-Waite-Smith structure, but it more or less ends there. There's a lot of differences. So this deck is great. I got it pretty early into when I was getting into tarot, so it took me a while to get used to it. I really love the guidebook, actually. The definition of the Hierophant card actually completely changed my idea of that card. That was a card I struggled with for a long time. So it's been great of just exposing me to new interpretations and art styles, and it's really great. People love him. His Kickstarter sold out in like 20 minutes, I think, for the Cosma Visions Oracle. So definitely check him out if you're into that kind of art. So the next deck I want to show is actually a really special deck in my collection. It is the Moon Void Tarot by Stephanie Caponi. So I actually met Stephanie and I received my first professional tarot reading from her, which was really incredible. And then I was able to purchase the deck from her as well. So she's a Brooklyn-based artist. I'm also in Brooklyn, so there's like a really nice community around here that offers things for tarot and witchy people and everything like that. So you can see a lot of that in her deck. These are the card backs. She just came out with a new printing that I believe doesn't have the SC initials on it. It's just the starry backs, but this was the first edition printing. And it's really unique art. So it's pretty much all black and white. You get occasional touches of red in there. I think there's red on her lips here. So this is the World card. Moon. I love it. It's super personal feeling to me. I actually only read for myself with this deck. I will not use it for other people. There's something very young and fresh about it, very relatable to me. Something else really interesting about this deck is that the main character of it actually embodies pretty much all of the characters. So here you have the Empress, but she's also the Magician, and the Fool. So really cool. You can really put yourself into the cards, because you can see that we can all embody all of these different archetypes and characters. So that's something that really stands out to me. But overall, awesome deck. Probably one of my favorites for sure. Next, we have a really fun one. So this is called the Trip and Wait Tarot. I don't know if you remember, but I mentioned before that the 70s would come back, and here we are. It's like very 60s, 70s. I saw this deck on a walkthrough on the Hermit's Cave YouTube channel. I love that channel. Simon is the best if you want to learn about different decks and things, so I will link his channel down below. But he finds these really cool, sort of obscure indie decks and has those in his collection. So this is one of them. This is made by Tarot Collectibles. They also have another similar deck called the Groovy Wait. They do a Winter Wait, so all these different spin-offs of the Rider Wait. Tons of different artwork and art styles that really accentuate it. So this one is super psychedelic and trippy. The card backs look like this, which is awesome. And then a few cards from here. So Fool, which we saw on the front of the deck, or of the box. Hanged Man. I fell in love with this deck as soon as I saw the walkthrough. I had to purchase it, and I'm not usually that impulsive when it comes to purchasing. So I love using this deck in the summer. It's really fun for like chilling with your friends, having wine, listening to old music, like that kind of thing. And next we have another quarantine purchase of mine, which is the Brady Tarot by Emmy Brady. This is the second edition. So it comes in this really great box, super sturdy. You can see sort of like the holographic look. I'm not sure if that's really what it's called. And you just slide the top off. There's a nice guidebook with it. The guidebook is actually written by Rachel Pollack, which is incredible. She's the author of 78 Degrees of Wisdom, which is basically the most famous tarot book ever. Anybody who reads about tarot reads 78 Degrees of Wisdom, so you can imagine how great the guidebook is. This deck has what you call a rose petal finish. So it's super smooth and soft, really pretty. This gorgeous gold edging. And what I really like about it is the black borders. The first edition had white borders, which I was not a fan of. I think the black really fits in with the whole aesthetic of the cards overall. And so this is an animal-based deck. It's actually based off of the various animals and wildlife of North America. And there's so much information and knowledge that went into this deck when you read the guidebook and you see how the animals relate to the card meanings. It's just incredible how much thought went into it. These were actually originally wood cuttings that the artist did, and then printed them and painted them, and just so much work went into it. They're incredibly detailed. So here, Daughter of Roots, so this would relate to Page of Pentacles. So roots having to do with earth, you can relate that back to Pentacles. This card I love. So it's actually, the deck's almost Thoth based in a way, because all of the cards have titles, even the minors. So this would be the Six of Pentacles, but here we can see that it's called Altruism. I've been working with it a bit. It is a little harder for me to connect to, I think because it's my first animal-based deck, and it's just a totally different vibe. Even the card meanings vary quite a bit from our traditional card meanings, so just something to keep in mind, but absolutely beautiful. So the last indie deck I have is called Meister's Weird and Wonderful Tarot of the Macabre. So this is probably the weirdest deck I have. It was a gift from a friend recently. She found it on Etsy, I believe. So it's macabre based, obviously, so it is a little darker and stuff. I'll just kind of warn you up front. It's not too crazy, but, you know, it's definitely not for everyone. I'll say that. I really like it, but it's not something that I want to use all the time by any means. I'm excited to use it for, like, more Halloween and Samhain and those sorts of times. I think it'll be really cool. But these are the card backs. I think I've put it in front of my face every time during this video, but I'll learn, right? Are pretty much all black and white, if you have splashes of color as well. But because it's macabre, there's a lot of bizarre characters, but there's also serial killers. Put that out there. So for the Fool, we have Ed Gein. I never actually knew really how to say his last name, but the guy who Psycho was based off of. For Death, we have Jim Jones. So super dark, not for everybody, but I think that the art is really incredible. The whole idea behind the deck is really interesting. A lot of the characters I've never really heard of, or people from history that I'm not as familiar with. I am into true crime, and I think that's why my friend picked this out for me, so that is an interesting tie-in. But there's also other characters from occult history and things like that. So the Hierophant is actually Aleister Crowley. My favorite card is the Moon card because it features Jack Parsons. And if you're not familiar with him, wild story. I won't go into it, but look him up. Pretty interesting, and he's the perfect character for the Moon card. I haven't worked with this deck a ton yet. I got it pretty recently, but I'm waiting until it's, you know, a little bit spookier of season to get into it. I have an Oracle deck I think it'll pair with nicely, which I'll get to shortly. Oh, and the deck also came in just this very regular white tuck box. I think I'm going to get a pouch for something at some point because this is obviously going to get beat up. But the cardstock is actually really nice. It's just sort of like normal playing card feel, really easy to shuffle, really high quality for the price, I would say. So that about wraps it up for my indie tarot decks. Now we're going to move on to my Oracle decks. This should be a pretty quick section. I have way fewer Oracle decks than I do tarot. So to start, as I showed you before, I have the Everyday Witch Tarot. I also have the Everyday Witch Oracle. So this comes in a smaller box. It just comes with this, and then it's a pretty short guidebook. But you don't really need the whole shebang for an Oracle deck. A lot of it's based on your intuition and just sort of those brief meanings from the creator. But this deck is really pretty. So these are the backs. Gotta love the cats. This is that same sort of aesthetic with the pointy hats and the tights. Really pretty. The Oracle deck is actually, in my opinion, better than the Tarot deck in a number of ways. One of them being that there's a lot more diversity in the Oracle deck. So you can see here that we have, you know, a queer identifying couple most likely on a very loving card, which is great. There's more people of color. So that's something that I think people were a little disappointed with the Tarot deck, because nowadays, you know, we expect to see that kind of thing in our modern decks. So, and as we should, of course. So it was great that the artist sort of took that feedback and made those changes to the Oracle deck, but overall they pair really nicely together. It's super pretty. It's very lighthearted. I don't use it that much kind of for that reason. It's just a little soft for me, softer than the Tarot deck for sure. But if you want something just sort of inspirational or more of a mantra or something for the day, I think that it would be great for that. So next we have the Astro Soul Oracle deck. So this is an independently made Oracle deck. Comes in a nice box, nice and loud. So really pretty. I love the design. This deck is really interesting. It's not your typical Oracle deck by any means. It's completely astrology based. So the cards all have things like this. So this is for one of the houses. So there's a card for every house, for every planet, retrograde, square, trine, all those sorts of astrological terms. There's also a card for all the moon phases. And of course, all of the signs. So it's not something that I think would be super easy to use for divination. You could, I think you could kind of shuffle them, and then if you wanted a message for sort of something to channel for the day or an energy for the day and maybe be inspired by the sign that you pull or something like that, I actually like to use them to set up spreads. So let's say it's the new moon in Aries. I'd get out the new moon card and I'd get out the Aries card, and then I would say, you know, what is the energy of this new moon? And I might pull a tarot card for that placement, or what is the energy of Aries trying to teach me, and pull an accompanying tarot card for that. So I like it for that. I also like it because I'm trying to learn astrology. I find it a lot harder than tarot. It's super mathematical, which people don't realize. It's not intuitive based, really. It's based on a strict system. So it's taking me a little time, but it's definitely something that I want to learn more about. I think it would really help me in my tarot practice and other things like that. So this deck has been great for that. Like, you could set up a whole spread of your birth chart or something like that, which is really great. So it's absolutely gorgeous. It's all this gold and blue. The edges are a little sparkly. I'm not sure if you can tell. Really well made, really pretty. Love it. All right, so I've just got 2 more decks to show you before I wrap things up. This is my favorite oracle deck. Also the first one I purchased. Seems to be a trend there for me. This is the Vintage Wisdom Oracle by Victoria Mosley. So this comes in a pretty nice box, sturdy. Comes with a guidebook, pretty standard. So I really love the art style of this deck. I believe it's based off of all these vintage postcards, vintage movie stars and silent film stars, and collaged in this really interesting way. Super pretty, really unique. So I use this pretty often. Typically I use Oracle for a clarifier when I'm doing a tarot reading, if I want the overall energy of the reading or something like that, or if I just want something more like a simple message for the day, I'll use Oracle. So it's been great for that. I love pairing this in particular with the Moon Void Tarot. There's just something really ethereal and feminine and lovely about that combination. So highly recommend this deck. The backs look like this. Which are like sort of creepy but cool. Yeah, definitely my favorite. And then lastly, we have the Halloween Oracle. So this is the Oracle deck I mentioned that I would like to pair with the Macabre Tarot deck this year, I think. Unfortunately, these cards are also shiny, which isn't my favorite. These are the backs. A little hard to shuffle, a little sticky, but not bad. And they're just like perfect Halloween cards. So you got things like the Black Cat, for scrying. And then there's a few of these skull cards. So there's like the Skull of Light, Skull of Dark, Skull of Flowers, and then the guidebook goes into all of that. And then there's a witch card and a mummy card and all those very typical Halloween things, but it's just like a little bit darker than I think we're kind of used to for Halloween style things. So I know there's the Halloween Tarot out there, which I think is really cute, but it's like a little too cute. This I think is good for more, maybe even shadow work or something like that. So will be definitely interesting to pair with the Macabre Tarot deck. I'm probably going to be doing like a whole Halloween Samhain theme spread and things on my Instagram, so be sure to check that out if that's something you're interested in. But that about wraps everything up. I hope that you guys enjoyed this. It was really fun to sit down and for me to actually get all my decks together and see like what my collection is. And of course I knew which ones I had, but kind of seeing everything together and maybe thinking about different ways to pair things and stuff like that. Let me know down below if you like this kind of video, something a little bit more relaxed. I do want to ease up a little bit on the education. It's definitely important, but tarot is also supposed to be fun and something to just sit down and hang out with people about. And I think that there's some cool chats that we could have over tea or something that would be fun and cozy and great for this time of year. So thank you so much for tuning in. I will link my Tarot 101 playlist down below if you have not checked that out. But stay tuned next week for my next video, which I'll probably be talking about the next 10 cards in the Major Arcana for part 4 of Tarot 101, and then pick things back up with something a little more fun and easy going after that. So just a little back and forth. We'll see what kind of groove we find. Still early in the process, but thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe, like this video. Anything to support is really appreciated, and thank you so much, and have a great day.